A calloused hand closes around Bruce Lee's collar. The grip yanks hard, fabric tightening against throat. The booth shudders. Glasses rattle across scarred wood, amber liquid sloshing. Officer Daniel Sullivan looms above, face flushed crimson, pores leaking sweat that mingles with the stink of cheap whiskey. His breath rolls out hot and sour. Bruce's students freeze mid-conversation. James Park's knuckles whiten around his bottle. Robert Tanaka's jaw clenches, chair scraping back an inch. The Foghorn Tavern continues its midnight hum around them, jukebox wailing, pool balls cracking, but their corner of the world constricts to this single moment. Sullivan pulls harder, veins bulging in his forearm. Bruce's head tilts forward, but his eyes remain level, dark, calm as deep water over stone, no flinch, no fear flickering across his features. His shoulders stay loose, hands resting on the table as if the drunk cop gripping his collar were nothing more than wind. The big man's other fist cocks back, trembling with rage. Conversations at nearby tables stutter and die. A woman's laugh cuts off mid-note. The bartender's hand freezes on a glass. The entire bar seems to inhale and hold its breath, waiting for the explosion. But what happens next would change everything. Bruce's hand snapped upward, fingers closed around Sullivan's thumb like wire-catching meat. A sharp twist, the grip shattered. Sullivan's hand peeled away from the collar, joints popping in the silence. Bruce rose, fluid, no wasted motion. His left hand coiled around Sullivan's thick wrist before the cop could blink. He rotated it inward, precise angle, tendon pressure mounting. Sullivan's mouth opened. No sound came, just whiskey breath and shock. The pain arrived like lightning. Sullivan's knees buckled. He dropped hard, kneecap cracking against wooden floor. His face drained from crimson rage to paper white, jaw muscles clenched so tight they trembled. The bar watched a 200-pound man folded by physics, not fury. Bruce held the lock steady, no malice in his eyes, no triumph, just absolute control measured in millimeters. 1 degree more and the wrist would snap. Sullivan felt that edge, the terrible mercy of restraint. Bruce released him. Sullivan gasped, cradling his wrist. He staggered upright, cheeks burning under the neon glow. Every witness stared. His humiliation hung thick as cigarette smoke. But what flickered behind Sullivan's eyes in that moment, rage rebuilding or something far more dangerous, would determine whether this ended or exploded. Air rushed into Sullivan's lungs in a ragged gasp. He staggered upright, knees unsteady, shoulders hunched forward like a wounded animal testing its weight. His cheeks burned crimson under the dim barlight, not from exertion, but from something far worse. Every eye in the foghorn locked onto him. The bartender froze mid-pour. 2 men at the counter twisted on their stools, drinks forgotten. A woman in the corner booth whispered something behind her hand. Even the jukebox seemed quieter now, its melody thin and distant. Sullivan's jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. His fists balled at his sides, knuckles blanching white. The tendons in his neck stood out like cables under tension. Humiliation, raw, public, absolute, settled over him like wet concrete, hardening with every passing second. Bruce remained seated, still as carved stone. His expression gave nothing, no triumph, no mockery. Just that unbearable calm. Sullivan's breath came faster. Sweat beaded along his hairline despite the November chill leaking through the door cracks. He could walk away now, slink into the fog like a whipped dog, or he could make this right. His weight shifted. His right hand drifted lower, fingers brushing cold leather at his hip. Sullivan's hand settled on his belt. His fingers found leather, found metal beneath. The snap unclasped with a whisper that cut through cigarette smoke like a razor. Neon light, red then blue, caught the dull glint of steel at his hip. Just a flash enough, the Foghorn Tavern inhaled and forgot to breathe. Conversations didn't trail off. They died, mid-syllable, mid-laugh. A glass froze halfway to a patron's lips, amber whiskey catching the light. Someone's fork hovered over a basket of fries, grease cooling in the sudden stillness. 23 witnesses became statues. Sullivan's palm pressed against cold metal. His thumb traced the grip, the weight of it familiar, comforting. A solution to humiliation. Bruce Lee did not move. He sat in the booth, hands resting on the scarred wooden table, his spine straight, his breathing even. But his eyes, those eyes locked onto Sullivan with the focused intensity of a hunting bird, tracked every micron of movement. Few could understand what it meant to stare down a drawn weapon without flinching, to calculate angles and outcomes while the room held its collective breath, to know that one word could collapse a future or save it. Bruce's lips parted. One syllable, don't. Sullivan's fingers stopped, trembling against steel. But what happened in the next 3 seconds would determine whether blood stained the Foghorn's floor, or whether something far more dangerous than violence would be born. Bruce leaned forward, his voice dropped to gravel, each word edged with iron certainty. Pull that gun, your career ends tonight. The tavern air thickened. 23 witnesses stared, mouths half open, breaths suspended. Bruce's gaze never wavered from Sullivan's flushed face. Witnesses everywhere, assault, weapon, intoxicated, each word landed like a hammer blow. Sullivan's jaw slackened, the weight of consequence pressed down on his shoulders, heavier than any opponent's hands. Think something in Bruce's tone carried more authority than any badge ever could. It wasn't a threat, it was mathematics, simple, unavoidable, the equation of ruin laid bare under flickering neon light. Sullivan's hand trembled against the cold steel of his holster. His fingers twitched, then slid away, leaving the weapon untouched. The big cop stumbled backward, his hip caught the edge of a wooden chair. It scraped across the floor, the sound sharp as breaking glass in the sudden quiet. He turned, lurched toward the exit. The door swung wide on protesting hinges. Cold November wind rushed in, carrying the smell of fog and salt water. It bit through sweat-soaked shirts and whiskey haze. Sullivan vanished into the gray wall of mist beyond the threshold. But 2 weeks from now, something far more dangerous than his rage would walk back through that same door. The door swung shut. Sound flooded back into the Foghorn Tavern like water breaking through a dam. Bruce settled into the booth, the vinyl cool against his back. His drink sat untouched, ice melting into amber. James Park's hands trembled against the scarred wood table. Robert Tanaka exhaled slowly, the kind of breath a man takes after dodging a speeding car. The bartender resumed wiping glasses. Conversations restarted, tentative at first, then louder. Someone laughed, too loud, too sudden. James leaned forward, voice tight. What if he had pulled it? Bruce lifted his glass. The liquid caught the neon glow, casting fractured light across his knuckles. He sipped, eyes distant, focused on something beyond the smoky air. Then I would have taken it from him. The words landed flat, matter of fact, no bravado. Robert stared just like that. Bruce set the glass down. The physics are simple, the speed, that's practice, but giving him a choice to do right mattered more than proving I could. James frowned. He could have ended you. Bruce's gaze sharpened. He could have ended himself. Every person carries that choice. Which path they take, that's where power lives. Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither student fully grasped yet. Something had shifted tonight, something irreversible. And 14 days from now, that shift would walk back through the same door, sober and searching. 14 days passed like held breath. The school door opened on a gray afternoon. Hinges creaked. Cold air swept across polished floorboards, carrying the scent of rain-soaked asphalt. Officer Daniel Sullivan stood in the threshold. His uniform pressed crisp, shoulders slumped forward, eyes red-rimmed, traced with exhaustion that no sleep could cure. His hands hung at his sides, empty, palms open, no swagger, no armor, just a man stripped down to raw edges. James Park froze mid-strike at the wooden dummy. Robert Tanaka's stance faltered. The room contracted around silence. Sullivan stepped inside, his boots scraped against wood. I was drunk and stupid. The words came rough, scraped from somewhere deep. You handled it better than I deserved. Bruce turned from the mirror, expression unreadable as stone. He said nothing, waited. Sullivan's throat worked. He swallowed hard. I want to learn how you stayed that calm. No rage, just his voice cracked, just control. Few could understand what it cost a man like Sullivan to stand there, pride shattered, uniform meaning nothing, asking for mercy twice. Bruce's eyes narrowed, his arms remained crossed. The wooden dummy cast long shadows across the floor, but what Bruce would demand in return, no one in that room could have predicted. Bruce said nothing. He stood motionless, dark eyes tracing every line in Sullivan's face. The hollows beneath his cheekbones, the muscle twitched near his jaw, the raw exhaustion carved into his posture. Seconds stretched, the air thickened. Sullivan's breathing turned shallow. Finally, Bruce's chin dipped. A single nod. I'll teach you the techniques. But first you must understand something fundamental. He stepped closer. The floor creaked beneath his weight. Being able to hurt someone easily makes it more important, not less, to choose restraint. Sullivan exhaled, shoulders dropping an inch. Yes, I see that now. Bruce circled him slowly, measuring. Most men want power to use it. That makes them dangerous. You came here ashamed. That makes you teachable. When do we start? Bruce gestured toward the polished training floor, mirrors reflecting their silhouettes in duplicate. Now. Sullivan moved forward, legs stiff with uncertainty. He stripped off his jacket, folded it carefully. His hands trembled as he placed it on the bench. Bruce pointed to his own wrist. This is where control begins. But what Sullivan didn't know, what Bruce would demonstrate in the next 60 seconds, would shatter everything he thought he understood about strength. Sullivan's palm hit the training mat again. Sweat stung his eyes. The wooden floor smelled like decades of effort, salt and old varnish mixing under the Oakland sun that sliced through the window. Bruce's fingers closed around his wrist, rotating it outward until tendons screamed geometry. No force, just angles. Sullivan tapped twice. Bruce released. Weeks became months. Sullivan learned wrist locks that folded grown men without bruising. He learned pressure points that whispered compliance instead of shouting dominance. He learned leverage that borrowed an opponent's weight against them. But between each technique, Bruce planted deeper seeds. A weapon is not power, Bruce said one afternoon, correcting Sullivan's grip. Restraint is power. Sullivan wiped his face with his forearm, breathing hard. I don't follow. Bruce gestured toward the wooden dummy in the corner. That dummy never tires, never bleeds, never goes home to family. You do. Every person you face does. The moment you can control someone easily is the moment you must ask yourself if control is even necessary. Something shifted in Sullivan's shoulders. They dropped, softened. He began arriving at scenes differently. His hand stopped drifting toward his belt when voices rose. His arrest reports thinned. His incident logs filled with words like verbal resolution and voluntary compliance. Few could understand what he was unlearning. But the people he encountered felt the difference immediately. What none of them knew yet was how far that difference would travel. Sullivan stood before 20 fresh-faced rookies in the academy gym. The smell of floor wax and nervous sweat hung thick. He rolled his shoulders, remembering the weight of shame that had crushed them years ago at the Foghorn Tavern. His voice came out steady now, stripped of the arrogance whiskey used to provide. Being able to hurt someone easily makes it more important to choose restraint. The recruits shifted, uncertain. One raised his hand. But if someone resists, then you control without cruelty. Sullivan demonstrated the wrist lock Bruce had taught him, applying pressure until compliance came naturally, releasing before injury. Every person you encounter goes home to someone. Your power isn't in the damage you can do, it's in the damage you choose not to do. Years folded into decades. Sullivan's students became sergeants, captains, training officers themselves. They taught the same philosophy. Arrests dropped across precincts, complaints fell, lives continued unbroken. Bruce Lee had died young, but his lesson outlived him, spreading through careers, through choices made in split seconds on dark streets, through hands that could destroy but decided instead to guide. That midnight confrontation had never really ended. It simply kept choosing restraint, one officer at a time, forever rippling outward into the world that needed it most.